Hello, and welcome to RED's cinematography series, Behind the Look. I'm Nada Albright, and I work with filmmakers for RED. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with executive producer and director Michelle MacLaren and cinematographer Markus Förderer on the Apple series, Constellation. Welcome, you two. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
And as you can see, we're on the lovely Stage 4 saloon at the very busy RED Studios, Hollywood.
It's a fun place to be.
Yeah. No reason Western theme. So I read, Michelle, which I thought was really fun, that you approach shooting action sequences with mathematical deconstruction. So I thought you guys definitely would have gotten along pretty well. So how did you two get to know each other and meet for this project?
How did we get to know each other and meet?
Yeah.
Well, Markus and I actually met in a cafe nearby here. And there was 3 DPs that the producers were introducing to me. And Markus actually had worked with Rawson Thurber, thank you. Markus had actually worked with Rawson Thurber, and Rawson was renting office space in our offices at the time. So I called Rawson and I said, hey, what's this guy Markus like? And all I can say to you is the last time I saw Markus, I told him we're gonna have to fight over Markus now for moving forward. So we met in a cafe near here, and I can't remember what the conversation was, but I left the meeting thinking, oh, this is the guy that I wanna work with.
Yeah. I think we're almost neighbors, but we never ran into each other before, and we hit it off right away and talked about. I think, have a very similar sensitivity to storytelling and working with the camera and lenses. And
yeah,
I was when I read the script, because everybody who watched the show right knows it's quite complex to understand in the beginning, and I wasn't quite sure where this is gonna go. But after meeting you, I was so confident this is gonna be very exciting, and then I couldn't even wait to get started.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and I think Markus and I, interestingly enough, complement each other. We actually have very similar sensibilities, but we both come from different backgrounds, and Markus has much more experience with visual effects and volume stage. I mean, I have a fair amount, but I've got a lot of practical experience, as you do too. But I tend to lean towards the practical, and you lean a little bit towards marrying the two, I would say. And so we really pushed each other, I think, out of our comfort zones sometimes. Yeah. And that I loved. Like I was very excited when I left that first meeting, thinking this is somebody that we're really going to connect on how to approach this.
Yeah, it's a unique project. Let's talk about working in zero gravity, just to start, and with Scott Kelly. And we have some pictures of you guys on set with him. How did that all come about? When did you know, okay, we're gonna need an astronaut?
I knew we needed an astronaut consultant. I like to approach everything very grounded and very realistic as possible. And I thought, I wonder if we could get Scott Kelly. So I DM'd him, and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but he did, thankfully. And he became our consultant, and he was amazing. Yeah. I mean, it was truly amazing. He came to Berlin, and he taught all of us about what it was like how to move in space and physically and emotionally, the challenges. It was incredibly helpful to the actors and the stunt people, and a lot of ideas came from him. And we said, how are we going to secure Paul to the ISS when we're chopping his arm off? And he said, duct tape. We use duct tape for everything. There's no counter force, so you just want to hold him in place. So that's why he's duct taped to the side of the ISS.
So, yeah, and then you always see her when she's working, putting the nuts and bolts on the. I love those details, especially. Did you feel, Markus, like, were you apprehensive, or were there things that you thought, I don't want to do this thing that sometimes you see, or?
I think, we watched many other space shows and films, and I think what we kind of wanted to avoid is this traditional Hollywood perfect floating camera, and I think we were really inspired by Scott Kelly's videos. He showed us a lot of his personal videos he took on the ISS, how the astronauts film themselves, and how can we put the viewer in the shoes of one of those characters, following Numi's character as she's like struggling to fix the ISS. So we really tested a lot, tried different rigs and handheld, or we suspended a camera operator on a wire rig to mimic that kind of feel of a floating astronaut capturing his crewmates.
What's happening in this picture right here?
So this is a sequence that we were doing where the ISS has been crashed into,
Yes.
this is of course going to come out after the season, so spoiler alert, is crashed into by Irina, dead body, and it's floating around in space, and there's damage, and everybody's trying to get to the Soyuz to escape to Earth,
Yep.
and Joe comes along, and there's a fire, and Ilya is separated, trapped by the fire, and Ilya and Joe fight the fire to get to safety to the other Soyuz. And in this shot, they're using the fire extinguisher to blow themselves backwards. There's a fireball coming at them. And so we took out the side of the ISS. One of the things that I would say is that Markus and I really wanted to do everything as practical as possible. So there's very little green screen very little of the actors are actually against. I mean, obviously the wires had to come through the ceiling, and we had to take sides out for the cameras and lights and stuff, but we made it as realistic and as claustrophobic as possible by using as much of the set as possible. So in this particular instance, we're doing a profile shot here as they're going to fly backwards, and all of them are on wires, and there's several stuntmen who are controlling different parts of the wires attached to different parts of their bodies, because if you pick somebody up in the middle, their legs and their feet hang down.
Sometimes you see that.
And you've got to have pick points on various parts of their body. So there's a lot of puppeteers. But when we were actually shooting this, we were always shooting the actors against the actual set.
Yeah, those pictures of the ISS, here's an interesting picture too, of them with the rig.
That's actually a rehearsal set. Our amazing production designer, Andy Nicholson, he built the ISS in detail, like he's an expert in everything. And that obviously took some time. So while they were constructing, we had a proxy set to rehearse with the actors and our camera team, so we could find the best angles and work out with the stunt team and the actors how they can sell the illusion of zero gravity.
And Markus and I would go in there with our iPads and iPhones, and sometimes we take some cameras with us, some film cameras, but and we'd practice about what is the best way to shoot this, and it was really helpful for everybody to figure out, because it's a dance between the actors and the cameraman.
Yeah. I saw Numi talk about that in an interview with you. That was interesting. She said it looks effortless if she's floating, but she's engaging her stomach muscles, and she's like so much harder than it looks.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. And that a lot of times she's floating vertically instead of horizontally.
Yeah. I think it was really important to you, right, to avoid that. A lot of Hollywood movies use this Superman flight. It's also, Scott Kelly pointed this out, right, when we asked him, what bugs you about watching movies, and that actors usually fly the Superman flight, but in real astronauts tend to stay upright, like on Earth, they just tip off a wall and float.
Exactly, and that was one of the things that he said to us was that you have to be really careful not to move quickly in the ISS, because if you hit something, you're going to bounce off and ricochet. And so, as Markus was saying, you hit everything you move things, touch them lightly, and you'll move along. But then we had to shoot an action sequence without everybody moving fast and keep it interesting. Yeah. And that was challenging, and that's why we brought in the fire extinguisher, because there was a reason that they could, move back fast, backwards.
It was one of my favorite shots. I mean, it was really exciting. And you both come from huge backgrounds in action, so it's such a perfect combination. So one of the things that we do with Behind the Look is we like to show the clips, and we like to show it in their entirety. So we have about 4 today. And so then we watch it a second time and with the sound off, and you guys talk over it. So I want to move to the clips. The first clip is from the first episode with Numi's character, Joe, driving through a very cold and snowy landscape. So let's just take a look at the clip right now with the sound on, please.
Please have it a bit warmer.
Oh, it's broken, honey. Snuggle down.
Mummy? What's she saying?
She's saying that the world is the wrong way around.
When's Daddy coming? Mummy? What's happened to Daddy?
Markus, tell me about the lighting challenges, or you were just talking to me earlier about, you know, you wanted to do it one way. How did you end up shooting it? What were some of the challenges with the beginning of this?
Like, I think when we thought about the look of the show and overarching, the episode 1 starts in Sweden, right? And we see the northern lights, and I felt like it was so important to you, right, that we show the scope of the landscape and really, because it's set at night, like so many scenes at night, sometimes you can maybe see the actor's eyes, but you don't see the landscape, right? And that was the whole point of going there. We wanted to show and feel the landscape. So we decided to shoot kind of day for night, like underexposing the image and giving the sense for depth. And because it was so important when you mentioned we're gonna go there for real, I thought it's gonna be a tough challenge, right? It's very cold there. It's very far north.
This is in February.
Yeah, in February.
And what is the challenge there? Like, what is the fear that
it's basically so remote, and it's the nights are very long. So the sun at this time of the year never comes over the horizon. So there's very long nights, but also very long blue hour, which is beautiful to photograph. But I just know from working like with gear and a big crew in a snow landscape might be slow. So always I had in the back of my mind you saying we want to show the depth, right, to the audience. So for all the driving scenes, we figured it's probably the best to shoot on a volume. So we capture interior. Yeah, so we capture the environment in a perfect light in this dawn magic hour look, and then have all the time on a soundstage working with children and getting all these pieces. Because if you would shoot for real in that landscape, we might be there for real, but it's impossible to light like several miles of road. Yeah, and it would always feel artificial. So all the wide shots you see are real, and there was no second unit. We shot our own.
Really? We did. Yeah. We wanted to shoot our own second unit, so we did. We shot all the second unit stuff, and we went out for a few days and did all the exterior driving stuff, and then each director did their exterior scenes in Finland. When we were outside the cabin or outside the car, we were in the real Arctic. But it was so smart of what Markus suggested to do the interior driving work on the volume stage, and that was a great combination of giving us the scope and the cinematic look, and of really being in the Arctic and really feeling that in the cold, and then we had this fantastic rig come up to shoot the plates for this, which got stuck in the snow.
Is that?
They call it the plate runner.
Yeah. Is that what that is right there?
Yeah.
The plate runner?
I think there was there's 7 Raptors and 7 KOMODOs and 1 Raptor pointing up, so we get almost a 360 and in that perfect light, and could shoot basically all day long on a volume that was quite.
And you shot 8K?
Yeah. So we did anamorphic, like this is spherical, 8K and 6K on the KOMODOs, but the majority of the show we shot anamorphic in an anamorphic mode, so it's a 5.1K.
Really? What lenses, since we're talking
used
about
the Panavision T-series anamorphics. We tested many lenses, and really, it was the first time for you to shoot anamorphic, right? And we looked at options, and I think we both responded to this just feels cinematic and right for that story.
And then we had to, so Marcus, I mean, I've always wanted to shoot anamorphic, but in television, a lot of people, today it's much more accepted, but a lot of people push against it. And we had to really pitch for it, so we had to shoot a presentation and everything.
Oh.
And I love the look of it, especially how you use flares.
Yeah. I think it adds so much realism, the interaction of light in those lenses, and I knew there's so many different. We of course we have this stunning landscape we've shot in Finland and Morocco and the space station, but there's so many more like regular Earth sets, let's say, like people live in a living room, right? Like, and we have to visually tie this somehow together. And I knew there's different directors and DPs working, so we had to find something that adds a strong visual character, which is like a baseline for the whole show to tie it together. And I think the lenses really helped.
I think they really helped. And one of the things, because of the nature of the story, that we wanted to introduce, whether consciously or subconsciously, was this sense of voyeurism and that somebody is watching. And so inside the ISS, it's very claustrophobic, and you're with Joe, but then you come back out wider, and there's maybe something in the foreground, and you get the sense. I always thought it was Joe in the other reality watching herself, but that's kind of metaphoric. But I think that stylistically, the reflections and the flares and everything that those lenses gave us in anamorphic really added to that, made it very beautiful.
Well, let's take a look at this clip without the sound. You guys, talk a little bit about this sequence.
I mean, we had an amazing drone unit. Ferdinand, our drone pilot, we shot.
It was great because the cameras could go to 40 below, which they needed to.
It was so cold you could not imagine, right? The
really?
rotors of the drone would freeze, and this thing was still rock steady.
Yeah, and it was still flying.
Then we were a really small unit, right? Shooting, like it was just me operating the camera for those exteriors, and we had a drone. And then, but at the end, I think it cuts together seamlessly. You would never think.
I am thrilled with it. I think it looks fantastic. The northern lights we did put into it, but when we were up there, we saw incredible northern lights. In fact, a lot of locals said they were better than they've seen their entire lives, and it really gave us a sense of what they should look like. And the visual effects guys did a great job putting the northern lights.
Yeah, we shot actually plates. Like, it was astounding. The first scout, we went up there many months in advance. We saw the Northern Lights for the first time, right, in our lives. And it's such an eye-opening moment. And you think, like, wow, this is hopefully going to be a signature, also color scheme for the show, right? And you were, in your early previews already, you tied together shots from the ISS, seeing the Northern Lights.
I wanted to tie it together from space to Earth and using the Northern Lights to
even like for the lighting and color palette, I also tried, even on Earth, for scenes to give a presence of space, or whatever that mystery is of the Cal and space. So many times we used like this cool cyan, green-blue light to give visually a cue there is more out there than what is to the eye.
That's nice.
And connect with that opening.
I thought Marcus and his team did an amazing job with the interactive light in that sequence.
Yeah.
Because, of course, all the exterior shots were shot with a real police car and the lights going off and everything. But then when you get inside and they see them coming through the rear window or reflected in the mirror, that's on the volume stage. So then you had to have interactive light on the actors as they're going past, right? Yeah. And so that was a bit of a dance.
Yeah, it was great. It was all controlled from a dimmer board, and what's amazing about the volume, it's all photoreal plates, right? There's no game engine, so it's real material. The actors could react to it, and Julie, our board operator, could see when is the police car coming and cue the interactive light appropriately, and the actors react to it, so it feels all very
It felt
seamless,
very
right?
organic,
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so it was interesting. The show opens in the cold, extreme cold Finland, and then we go to the extreme heat in Morocco, and it was amazing to see how well our gear worked. Like we actually had, our production was phenomenal. We had for 1 week before we went to Finland, a cold truck outside our stage, so every department could test their gear to make sure it's reliable in this environment, because it's extremely cold. Like, most electronics are not rated for these temperatures. So the sound people brought their sound equipment, the props brought their props, and the camera people brought our cameras and lenses. And it was amazing to see how well everything worked. Like, we never had any downtime.
That's great.
In either the heat or the cold.
Good.
I mean, the cameras were so versatile wherever we went.
That is fantastic. We talked earlier in a pre-chat about how you lit, why you lit a certain way in the snow, and how you did the lights over there. Can you talk about that real quick?
When we went to Finland to shoot all our exteriors, there's so many scenes in and outside the cabin. And the interior of the cabin we could shoot on a sound stage where we controlled lighting and have this blue magic hour forever. But for the exteriors, it was so important, like Michelle always emphasized, like we want to feel the depth and show the scope of that landscape. And I knew we had only so many hours of daylight, like the sun never comes over the horizon. We're so far north that we only had a couple of hours of this blue hour. And I knew we have to extend it or to allow for all these complex scenes to shoot. And I always feel like it's very hard to shoot night scenes in the snow. You always feel the light source, and it feels more like a stadium light or something if you do big cranes from far away. So I did some tests, and we came up with a solution, like I call it a UFO light. Like it's quite a unique rig where we had very powerful LED lights, like very focused beams, and we never light the actual area, but we light up the air, so to say, which sounds a bit crazy. But so we either had real snow or artificial snow or sometimes smoke in the air, and that was these strong beams light up basically the snow or the atmosphere above the frame, and that for miles would give a very gentle glow. And that was the idea, to extend this magic hour, northern lights feel, and we even programmed some subtle light changes with all LED on a dimmer board, so we could extend the presence of the northern lights even if they're not there anymore.
That's really smart. We have another clip, and this one's on the ISS. And so tell me before we run it where you built it and the size, a little bit of the scope of
the ISS.
Yeah.
So we were in Babelsberg in Potsdam, Germany, just outside of Berlin, on a very famous, I guess.
Soundstage.
Soundstage. It's the visual effects stage. I mean, it's ginormous. And I remember
they shot Metropolis on it.
Right.
It was the first science fiction film ever, I think, right?
Yeah, it had great history. Yeah. When I first walked into it and it was empty, I thought, wow, this is a lot of space. And it wasn't enough. We ended up spilling over into another stage. But Andy Nicholson, our production designer, built a realistic duplication of most of the ISS. In fact, Scott Kelly walked onto it and he said, wow, deja vu.
Man.
But of course, it all had to break apart in pieces, and the ceiling had to come off. And that's, as I said earlier, we kept as much intact as we could. And Markus came up with a really clever idea. Instead of putting green screen at the end of some of the shots of the ISS, there's actually photos back there that are blown up. You should talk about this.
Yeah, I literally shot with our camera a quick plate. So it has the same look, the same lensing. And then we printed with the art department. They just printed it on a cardboard. And my lighting team, we lit it. And that added a lot of depth instead of shooting into green screen, because you cannot, the stage is so big, but you can, I realized as it's so long, you could not fit the whole thing, even if we had so many modules. And Andy, which is amazing, right? Andy Nicholson is an expert in detail on the ISS, and usually films build it, if they replicate something like this, they build it smaller, maybe to cutting cost, and I think this is really to scale. Like some of our modules were huge. Like even this is from the Spacewalk, the EVA. The exterior pieces, they were giant.
They were life-size. We had life-size exterior pieces and suspended the actors. Numi was actually on the end of a crane arm, and the camera was, well, there were some cameras on the ground, and there was one camera on a crane. And again, the actors are working very closely with the stunt people. Martin Goers, our stunt coordinator, really worked hard with them because they couldn't move themselves. They had to be.
Oh, really?
They had to be moved. I mean, they could move their arms, but their whole bodies were in control of somebody else.
So the team who built the spacesuit, which are fantastic, they are so detailed. That also makes it heavy, and it's in zero gravity. It doesn't matter, you float, right?
Yeah.
But on Earth, it is.
I put the top half of one on. It's the most claustrophobic thing you could possibly imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that way.
I think what's really important to us, what we saw on that picture, that we use the real visors, because And it's such a realism to it. Like in many sci-fi movies, they just take it out to avoid reflections. But we blacked out our entire set, our entire stage, and because we had the real set pieces, you could really see the environment reflecting and the characters. When Numi is close to Ilya, you see the interaction. And real helmets space helmets have triple-layer glass, like for safety redundancy. That's something that would be really hard to replicate in visual effects. So it was really exciting to pull this off.
Let's take a look at this clip.
Mamma?
God morgon, älskling. Har du borstat dina tänder?
Ja,
Hur många minuter?
3 minuter.
Bra, för vi gör alltid 3 minuter.
Ska du på din rimpromenad idag?
Men du behöver inte vara orolig, baby. Det kommer gå så bra.
Jag vet.
Vill du säga god morgon till Jazz?
Hi Alice, good morning.
Hej Jazz. Är du nervös?
Just a little bit. Vill du titta på salladen? Den ser lite piggare ut tycker jag. Och liksom vakna till lite. Vad tycker du? Isn't it magical?
Wow, snyggt.
Men jag tror nog att jag kommer låta någon av de andra prova den först.
Ja.
Jag är lite orolig att den kommer förvandla mig till alien.
Copy that.
We have to whisper.
What is that?
Because they're doing something very fiddly at the cow.
Hey, Alice.
Hi Paul.
Your mom's big day today. RPL. Cow data, core signals green. Magnets aligned. 25.5.
Copy, phase 6.
Copy. Core temperature, minus 203 degrees.
Tune lasers. Come on.
What does it do?
It's looking for a new state of matter.
What does that mean?
Don't know.
84 days till you're home.
Only 84.
I can't wait.
Oh, I miss you so much.
I miss you too, Mama. Will you be careful when you go out there?
Always. Ska vi se om vi kan se dig.
Wow.
Look. There you are. You see?
We're ready.
All right. Good luck, son.
Good luck, Commander.
Always been lucky till now.
Hey, Alice. Wave to yourself.
Dig in.
Station RPL, you copy?
Get them back. We're in the middle of something.
Mamma, är du där?
Everything all right?
Hon är borta.
So, before we watch it again, because it was so packed with things to talk about, can we just explain the two timelines? And
Sure.
Let's start with that.
So when I first read this opening scene on the ISS, my instinct was, oh, I'm going to do this great oneer that goes all the way down through the ISS. And I realized, oh, I can't do that. We're cutting between two realities. But we had to do it in a way that we weren't tipping our hand too much to the audience. So if somebody's really, really observant, they might notice that certain things change. The Alice's actually change. There's Swedish and English. There's a Cal in one and there's not a Cal in another. But we wanted to do a sleight of hand. So the choreography had to be like a dance. And I knew ahead of time exactly where we were going to edit it. And we would marry the choreography or the what do you call it? Blocking. The blocking in each reality was the same. And then I had pre-planned where we were going to cut to, which was actually really helpful because we could only shoot it in certain segments. You can only go so far with the wires and the cameras and everything. So it actually, we could have done a oneer all the way through had it been one reality. We would have figured that out. But it isn't. It's made to look like it's one reality and one sequence, but you're actually cutting back and forth. And my hope is that people that didn't notice, they get all the way through episode 8, and they love it so much, and they go back to 1, and then now they do notice, and they see some of these differences.
Yeah, tell me about the ballet of this for you.
Ballet, yeah. So this is the first time we introduced zero gravity, right? Like we had to make it feel effortless, and this was, I was so influenced by, again, videos from Scott Kelly and other there's a lot of interesting high-resolution footage out there from NASA showing the ISS, like astronauts flying through the whole ISS, and also see the lighting. Like so many times we see when they do a press thing, it's very bright and brightly lit. Of course, we wanted to introduce the moody part, and so that was quite a challenge. We had to build in all the lighting into the set. It's like all LED lighting, so we could shoot 360 as much as possible. Sometimes we had to open parts of the ceiling for wire rigs, but not always the actors on wires. So, and I think that's where we came up with this amazing shot, right? Pulling out of the iPad, revealing Numi and flying back. And that's what I talked about earlier, like this feel of handheld floatiness. So it's not a shaky handheld, but as if our camera operator was suspended. So we tested many different rigs. We used like Steadicams, gimbals, Trinity, lots of very smooth handheld. We had like fantastic operators, and we practiced and watched reference. And then if you closely pay attention, we knew, like in real life, the astronauts, they film themselves and they film the experiments, and we needed all these different angles, how the cal would be handled. And we thought, like, how can we film this or fit it in the schedule to shoot all these pieces? And I remembered years ago that actually Red had supplied cameras to NASA to shoot experiments in space. And I thought it's not too far-fetched that we would use KOMODOs, which is the current technology of small cameras, which we didn't have to hide as film cameras, but we rigged it the way astronauts did, like with magic arms, and we spread them all over the ISS to film those pieces. And then later, because it's the same codec and the same workflow, it allowed us to use it as security cam footage, basically. But also sometimes
we needed it for future episodes. We knew certain security cam footage we needed. So we set these in places that we needed to, that they were going to see on the screens in Mission Control and in Bank Control in NASA. And so we knew certain footage that we had to have in certain places. We needed these cameras, but because we use the KOMODO, we also use some of the shots. It's not
like full screen.
Yeah, full screen. Like we went beyond security cameras. So we had that much more footage.
Yeah, and it marries great. Well, we're going to watch this again without sound, and so you can tell us some of the Easter eggs or tricks. What's going on? What are we seeing and not seeing?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so if you finish the last episode, it's really worth going back and watching 1 and 2. And
this is such a beautiful. The visual effects guys, Doug Lamore, our visual effects supervisor, their whole team did a phenomenal job on this. I was so happy with this. And here we really wanted to introduce Jo as a mom. Who happens to be an astronaut. And so she's having a conversation with her daughter about, have you brushed your teeth today? And we wanted to make it feel like she has this conversation every day, and it's about her daughter and her, but she happens to be floating through the ISS. And this shot was very important to us because at first you don't see her full body, and then we reveal it as she comes around the corner. You want to say something about the lighting there?
Yeah, so it's supposed to be early morning, right? That's why we start a bit more moody and enter the main module where Paul is working on the experiment. So I wanted to play also with those lighting transition coming from dark into light and feel the connection of the
So
ISS.
here, you see Paul go over to the side. Now we've cut to another reality there. It's a different Alice. So in both, and in the previous setup, there was no cal. There's a cal here. So in the previous setup, it's actually a different ISS. And sorry, I didn't mean to step on your...
No. You see plenty of cameras rigged to the wall. That's what actually in the real ISS, they have so many photography equipment because they're observing space and Earth from space. So they, in their free time or for scientific experiments, they photograph and they just Velcro all their gear on the walls. So we have those KOMODOs.
That's great.
We had Nikon cameras. A fun Easter egg.
That's
a real Easter egg.
The shot with with Jonathan Banks, with the screen behind him, that's a story point shot. I mean, we're trying to really sell the cal there without being too obvious. And of course, we use the KOMODO shot for that, which was
And
just on
that's,
camera.
I think, one of the most challenging shots. Like always, flying around corners and diving down the real cupola. So this again a replica of the real cupola, which is quite deep. And we had to, for certain shots, angle that set piece in different angles. So when she dives down, it has to be horizontal.
Yeah. So one set piece was without the cupola, but she could dive down, and then we had a separate set piece. Actually, we had two. We had the stunt one too.
Oh wow.
Where one where you go down into it, and then one where we actually had it horizontal. So she's coming sideways into it.
And
which
it's
is right
really,
there.
this was a really challenging shot. And then you were so precise about wanting to fly down with her. And everyone, like the stunt team, because in this specific shot, the Numi had to be on wires. And we were all, it would be a very delicate dance with the camera to dive down there between the wires. And we were all like, oh, can we do a cut here? Can we do a cut? But you were fighting for it. And thankfully, and we figured it out. Like we rehearsed and figured it out to dive down there with her. Yeah, one interesting thing, especially about the cupola, we tried to use real glass where we could, like the cupola has so many surfaces, and the real ISS again has like double or triple layer of glass, and we really played with reflections and double reflections, right, to hint at other realities, so seeing Numi twice or 3 times. So that was sometimes quite a lighting challenge, especially in a shot when we dive down with the camera operator following. But I totally love those challenges, like shooting multiple cameras but capturing that realism. I think we would not otherwise get.
I agree, and I think that because the way the set was designed and the way Markus did the lighting, we were able to shoot 360 a lot of the times, or at least 270, or we would shoot so much in camera. And just to speak to your reflection shot later in the episode, Jo dives down and she's watching the Soyuz fly away, and there's that double image shot, and that was all practical. There was anything
so beautiful.
Well,
that
the Soyuz was not practical.
So the first time we see Numi flying through the ISS, and I think when pre-production and you read the script and you imagine how amazing it's gonna look like, and then but it's so hard to pull this off, right? There's so many technical pieces with lighting and everything involved. But when we saw the final scene, when I saw it cut together, and recently actually when the episode aired, I saw it on my TV at home, and after a bit of a break, and I was so relieved, thinking like, wow, this really turned out the way we imagined it, or even better. Like, this is really, I was really grateful that this collaboration turned out to be to such a great scene.
Me too.
Well, it's true though, but like we've also come so far because there really are cameras in the ISS. We actually do know what they look like floating around.
Yeah.
So it's not just like our interpretation, or anything like it used to be, right? And so like, the bar is really high for you guys because our brains, we know now what it looks like.
100%. And and we put together footage for the actors to look at for research so they could see how they're floating. And as we mentioned earlier, Scott said he really doesn't like the Superman. If somebody's in a hurry, he can understand them going into the Superman pose, which we do. But he said a lot of the time he floats through with his legs crossed, which is what Numi does. He said sometimes he does this, which I think is really funny. But so there's a lot more vertical than there is horizontal until things get crazy.
We tried so many different techniques. We shot tests with different gimbals and rigs and handheld. But what's quite unique, we had a brilliant drone operator, and we strapped a KOMODO camera on a tiny FPV drone and actually flew through the ISS. Like, this really helped to sell the zero gravity, because I was watching these videos from Scott Kelly, our astronaut consultant, and he told me to get the smoothest shot, they can push off a wall and film with their iPhone, but even then they feel the shake, so they would sometimes just let go of the phone, let the phone fly. And I said, how can we possibly pull this off? And I remember I had an experience with FPV drones, and we talked to these amazing pilots because there's some very tight hatches to get through. And I think this added so much realism, and it's used over several episodes, and sometimes with stunt double or sometimes with Numi. That was quite exciting, flying around curves.
It was very tricky for them to do it because all the lights had to be off on the stage because, of course, the set was lit. And they would fly through and then have to fly back to number one. Nobody was allowed on the stage except the pilots and us. Everything had to be clear. And we used it way more than we thought we would use it. We used it for POV shots and just to set the tone and the mood. And I used it quite a bit for the POV stuff. And I think we put Numi into one of them. The one thing I would add to that sequence, that opening sequence, is when Joe's on the iPad, we also have picture-in-picture on the iPad.
Oh, yeah.
So Numi had to do all the action while holding a camera and film herself floating through the ISS so we could have the picture-in-picture.
Yeah, we couldn't use the actual iPhone because the actual selfie camera, because Numi was flying on a wire rig, so the ceiling was partly open. So she had to do another
She had to
pass.
walk. Sorry, she wasn't on wires. She had to pretend she was floating, and she walked. We had to do another pass.
That's so
We had to put the
cool.
ceiling in, and she had to hold the camera and do a pass.
And I always love that. It's vertical and that's horizontal, and she has a sweater on, and she speaks Swedish, and she speaks English.
That's something else, is that
Yeah.
we were very specific. If you want to get really detailed, her hair is parted on different sides, but it's very difficult to see the part. But yes, the vertical iPad, the horizontal iPad. We had a lot of
Really
subtle
clever.
differences. I mean, the set actually changes, and I don't think anybody notices it. It's interesting.
That's the fun, right? We talked about
Yeah.
like sometimes in films and shows you want to try to avoid continuity errors, but here
Yeah.
purposefully you
That's
found the
so
right
funny.
blend between we cannot point it out too much, otherwise people at this point in the story they don't know, they might be confused. But that's why it's so much fun once you finish episode 8 to go back and watch 1 and 2 and find all these Easter eggs, and that it all hopefully makes sense.
It does. Like, it's always bittersweet when I see that scene where she comes over to the astronaut doing the, who loses his arm in one reality.
Working on the cowl,
This is before, to me, in my mind, it's before the split. It's the last time they're both, it feels like the last time we see them together, and then one's dead, one's not.
Right.
You know.
So even though we were cutting between realities, they haven't switched yet. So that you're right. That they are, as they know each other.
It feels like the last of that before everything goes sideways.
Yeah.
Sense.
Yeah.
So this next clip that we're going to look at is just action-packed, and we touched on it when we were talking about the extinguisher. So let's run this one with sound.
Station, Houston on space to ground 1. You have a depressurization. All comms are open. Crew gather in Soyuz 1 evacuation capsule. Initiate pre-evacuation protocols.
Execute emergency response.
Houston, fire fog in Zyra.
Power down.
Ilya!
Joe, go immediately to nearest evacuation capsule, Soyuz 1.
Houston, there's a fire between us and Soyuz 1.
Gather in Razviet instead.
Joe! I can't get through!
Ilya, we need to get to the evacuation capsule.
Copy! What the fuck hit us? Something hit us!
Get to now.
I'm out!
Brace me. I'll get the hatch.
Station, we need to suffocate the fire.
Copy! On it! Shutting off pressurization in Zvesta! Something hit us! Are you guys okay?
I'm secured!
Crew, roll call.
Eriksson.
Andreev!
Osta. Sorry.
Lancaster.
I'm stuck.
Holy moly. I'm going to go right to it without sound. I want you guys to tell me how the heck he did that.
Oh boy.
I have to say, hats off again to Numi and her ability to sell the zero gravity, right? Not only do they have to stay in character, but because we wanted to shoot as real as possible, that fire extinguisher had real CO2, so we would interact with the set, so it's really heavy. So she had to pretend it's weightless, and that was basically on her. She's suspended on wires, but she had to.
But this whole sequence, she's on wires. Ilya, a lot of the time, is on a rolling chair. But she's on wires this whole time. She's also, the other thing is, she's a professional astronaut, and she, in the story, and she's highly trained. So she has a survival instinct, a composure. They're constantly trained of how to behave. And there was a real balance being, stifling the fear and battling the fire. But from an execution point of view, this is one of the hardest sequences. This is what I was talking about earlier about how do you shoot an action sequence quickly when everybody can't move too quickly. But this is something where we had to break this down to the minutia, to every single beat, to pre-visit, storyboard it. Everybody knew every single beat before we shot it because it was so incredibly complicated, as you said, with the CO2 canisters, and we shot it with and without that, and with the dance of the action with the actors and how they were moving. It was really important to me to tell the audience the story of you kind of educating the audience of how you move in zero G. So the story of hooking their feet underneath, pushing off, and then just that little moment. And I credit actually Andy Nicholson for this. We were shooting it, and Andy said something to me about Ilya and how are we going to, show the audience about the CO2 canister, and I was like, you're right. So we put that little bit in where he shoots it off without securing himself, and he flies back on the wall and hooks his foot in and pushes off. And that was really important to us. And Markus and I had to figure out how to shoot that piece without really having the pre-planned tools for us. I mean, not just us, the whole team.
But yeah, you've been doing all this previs.
Figure it out. Yeah. And I really was very passionate about getting that in there, and I thought it went really well. But the lighting, the interactive lighting, we never did anything in post, the lighting. This interactive lighting, Markus did all that.
So right, we talked about, look, should we use flame bar or something? But in zero gravity, obviously fire behaves very differently, right? It doesn't go upright.
Yeah.
So we placed all kinds of LED lights, doing interactive fire lighting, sometimes move it with the actors. And then our visual effects team did a fantastic job simulating the structure of the flames. But I think the beauty is the real interaction of the CO2, the gas, and the real lighting merging with the final visual effects. Quite happy.
And everything shot in NASA, and I won't tell you why, but had to be all shot in one day. And this was an empty hotel space. Our team decorated it all. But we needed to know ahead of time what was going to be on those monitors. And we had to shoot that for all these, huge number of screens. But just a little move right like that, when she jumps over to grab the fire extinguisher, she's on wires, so the ceiling was open, wires are coming down. The camera was behind the fire extinguisher, so the wall behind the camera was out. It's just, there's so many different, and you had to light it, and we're in a tube. Right, so it's really tricky.
It's incredibly claustrophobic. This set is the Russian section, right? If you're in there, you would not believe,
And you're tall.
Our astronauts can, and also our camera operators were tall, and we constantly bumped our heads. And then there's one thing, Michelle is fantastic, running us through storyboards and the previous very detailed plan for this sequence, and you hear her passionately talking about it in pre-production, and you think, wow, this is an amazing sequence. Can't wait to watch this. Yeah. And then you think, how are we going to pull this off? Because
that in-between part.
So that last shot there is, so we had one piece of set that was vertical, and it was very, very difficult to shoot in this vertical tube. And we put a scaffolding up inside of it, and we did that last shot in a winter where they came through on wires. I guess we did Ilya and Joe separately. Joe comes through first. And then when Ilya comes through, the camera pulled down, revealed the other astronauts. They all talk to each other. We do a little push in and we're out. So that was, other than marrying Joe and Ilya together coming through there, that was a winner.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the other actors, they're really miming zero gravity, which works fantastic.
They're all standing.
And it again was so helpful.
Oh, they're miming. I get it.
Having Scott Kelly, he was usually on the monitor, and he could jump in and say, this was great, or I would do less, right? It was so helpful to have.
It was. We actually had Scott there for the first few days. But the first few days of shooting the ISS, we had to shoot this fire sequence because somebody came down ill so what we were going to shoot was not available. And so they called me and Markus and said, will you guys mind starting the ISS with the fire sequence? And we're like, okay. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, but you did it. Well, the next clip we're going to look at is one of my favorites because it's a spacewalk. And it's completely different vibe than what we were just talking about. So let's just take a look at the clip right now with the sound on, please.
Joe, I'm coming.
Check my O2 mix.
Come on, Joe. Come on. Just a little. Yes, Joe. I got you. Oh, yeah. Just secure it.
Скажи ему дать нам изображение.
Андреев, дай изображение.
Невозможно.
It was a woman. USSR. Soviet. I saw a dead female cosmonaut.
Well, let's take a look at this clip without the sound. You guys, talk a little bit about this sequence.
So here we see Ilya, this is just after Numi had this collision. Ilya trying to rescue Joe. Very complex, technically complex sequence where we see Numi floating full body, and this spacesuit is quite a heavy beast. We shot on the largest stage in Berlin and blacked out the entire stage so we could shoot with real visors. So we have this realism, like you see Joe and Ilya approaching and you see they're reflecting each other in their helmets. And real space helmets have actually a triple glass layer for safety redundancy. And whenever we could, we tried to play with those double reflections and hint at the different realities. And like this specifically, like everything the actors touch is real. Like our art department built a full-size segment of the scaffolding. We rehearsed this many times, right, with our stunt team, that when we bring in the actors, because it's such a, like you said,
hard, yeah.
claustrophobic and hot and different environment to be in a spacesuit, so
Totally.
to get them out of there as soon as possible.
Yeah. And so we had different set pieces, and so when they come around the end of the capsule, that's just its own little piece. But that shot when Numi is flying towards the camera, she's actually on a crane. And we actually did her coming at the camera, and then we shot her reversing as well, because we use it again when her cable gets pulled back. So we got 2 in 1, so to speak, for that. But this sequence was previs to an inch of its life because it's so expensive to shoot. So we prevised everything. And once we got the previs, there was things that Markus and I thought we wanted to add or change. So we went out on a weekend and with the stunt people, and we shot the shots that we thought we needed to add, cut it into the previs. So it was completely edited before we shot anything because it was so incredibly complicated to shoot. And to your point, putting the actors in these suits was very, very difficult, and for them to be emotional. And they did a phenomenal job. They are never on the ground there. They're on cranes or wires.
The whole time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And our stunt team, of course, is in there whenever they can. But Numi was really phenomenal at it.
Shot.
So was Henry.
And this actually, so this is lit all with all the LEDs we controlled from a dimmer board on the helmet and inside the helmet. And we used one big artificial sun, it's like a big, super strong LED light, which we also had on a crane, so we could move it as other sequences on a spacewalk when we see the sun rising, that we could always feel the sensation of the ice as moving, because it's actually moving very fast. Like we think it's just up there like a satellite, but it I think in orbit is 45 minutes, roughly.
It? Yeah,
It's
yeah.
falling.
It's
really
very
just
fast.
always falling.
And talk about the helmet light, Markus, because you had to light their faces inside the helmet,
inside
right?
the helmet. Yeah, so actually the light is shooting into the helmet glass while they're reflecting back in their face. It's very difficult to get nice lighting, and then obviously you don't want it to feel too artificial or sci-fi, because we were very closely looking at the real helmets and how they work, and they obviously don't have lights inside. So we got to be very subtle there.
So you actually put a light inside the rim of the
and we could
helmet.
control sections of it to shape the face. To still, that's the thing. You want to. We had so much research. We want to be true and authentic, but still, this is a cinematic interpretation. So you want it to feel cinematic but real.
And of course, the lights that Markus wanted are built into the helmet, and we had the camera, her body cam, built onto her. I mean, there's so many details in this suit.
And it was so great having the real glass visor, playing with those anamorphic lenses. You get the real flares. And
it was incredible.
I saw a flare in one of those. I was like, oh.
Yeah. I hope that helps sell the realism.
It does. This last clip that we're going to look at, we're just going to go right into talking about it without sound. Why don't you guys tell us what's going on here? I think this was really interesting.
This is the landing site where the Soyuz landed, and Jo is reunited with her daughter. We only had one helicopter, just point of fact. But anyway, this is they get in. What's about to happen here is they get on the helicopter, and what happens here? This is all done in camera, which I was so excited about. This was a scene that was sent to us late. We were already shooting, and Peter had this new idea. Peter Harness, our showrunner and writer, and he sent it to me. I think we were already in Morocco, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is kind of awesome. So Markus and I put our heads together and we were like, let's do this in camera, which is what is about to happen. And we did. But what it meant was you establish all the actors on the helicopter, and then you push in tight on Alice, and then we cued everybody and they ran off. I mean, the behind the scenes is pretty funny.
Yeah, I bet.
And then you pull the camera out and everybody's gone. And the one CG thing we had to do was take out anything, the vehicles and stuff that were outside.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we had to remove them. And then the same, we come back in here and they're all there. Well, this was all done as one. So they leaped out and then they leaped back in. And it was, incredible.
It's such a tight, it's a big military helicopter, but it's still very tight in there. It was a good dance to figure that out. And there's not much time with daylight hours. We try to shoot in low sunlight, but it worked out quite well. And it's so important that we said, if there's any cut, it will not work. So we need to find a way.
It's a very emotional scene, too.
It's
for those two.
For these two, it's very emotional, but to me, too, it's the promise of more. That this isn't just happening to Jo. This is happening to Alice, too. This is bigger than we imagined. And this is the end of the second episode, and we've seen something strange happening with Jo, and now we get to know, this is bigger.
It's really a great turning point.
This location was spectacular. We shot all around this area. We shot different locations in Morocco. We needed an airport in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, man.
And we found one in Arashidia, which was hours from Marrakesh, and literally an airport in the middle of, 270 of it was the middle of nowhere. It was just stunning.
It's also so bright and then super dark inside.
And it was a great contrast from Red. We opened the show in the cold northern Sweden, the story, and coming to the hot, bright desert. So it was a nice contrast. And
I have to say, Markus is amazing at many, many things. But an interesting little note is Jonathan Banks and Barbara Sakwa, who could not make it to Morocco for various reasons, were never in Morocco. And one of my favorite cheats is when we're shooting at the airport, we did these very wide shots, and they land, and Jonathan Banks gets out of an airplane and goes up to Irina, and then they talk. And so we had to shoot the conversation in Berlin. Well, when we're shooting the scene at the airport, when Henry is then going to go out to where the Soyuz is, we had a double running across the tarmac and these big wide shots. And then we cut to closer on Jonathan, and he's running along the back of an SUV, and he's getting stuff out of the trunk and everything, and that was shot in a parking lot in Berlin. And it's because of the lighting that it marries seamlessly. You'd swear Jonathan Banks was in Morocco, and he couldn't make it.
And my brain is saying, are you sure it's not his triple? It's quadruple. There's a lot of Jonathan Banks.
This was such a tricky shot. I mean, literally, James Darcy's running out that back door. As we're pushing in, he's running out the side door.
It's so
great. And
it's
really I don't know, is it Rosie? I don't know. Is it Rosie?
I don't know if it's Rosie or Davina. I can't tell the twins
we had
apart.
like twins playing Alice, and it's really the ballet. Like you have to, it's her performance in the right time with the camera revealing, selling that Numa's not there. Numa's obviously still right squeezed next to camera, but that made it work so well. And I'm always fascinated. Like if you look back into history of cinema, the early cinematographers were actually magicians. Like they used cinema as a magic trick, right, and showed stuff. And I'm always fascinated, like, how can we use techniques? Because all
Markus
we know
is a magician, though. For real life, Markus is a magician. So you bring some of his magician knowledge to cinematography, and that's really fun when we do the sleight of hand. That you're very clever. I have to say that I look at this, and it's what I dreamed it would look like, Markus. So thank you.
Well, you know, actually, we haven't discussed, because I know we talked to him before, the other two cinematographers, and they did the other two, were they in blocks, or how did you do that?
They were in blocks. So Markus and I did 1 and 2, and then Oliver Hirschspiegel and Frank Lamb did 3, 4, 5, and Joseph Cedar and Yaron Sharf. And Joseph Cedar and Yaron Sharf did 6, 7, and 8. And I felt so incredibly fortunate that we had these 2 amazing directors and amazing cinematographers. Yeah. 1 and 2 was so massive that the whole thing was block shot. So we actually worked the first day and the second to last day of the entire shoot. So it was a huge, massive collaboration. Yeah. And Markus and I set up the tone and the style and the look with it, made a massive lookbook and everything. But these other filmmakers took that and ran with it in such a beautiful, wonderful way.
And it's also really inspiring to see, right? Because like I said, we shot sometimes in parallel, or we started setting up one scene, we moved on, scouting the next location, and we would see their dailies, and obviously shooting the same sets, even the same lighting. What they come up with was always really inspiring, and a great collaboration. We also, in pre-production, we had a great overlap with the other DPs. We could really discuss, and we shot so many tests to make sure it works for everyone.
Yeah, and the other thing that we would do is, because the stories are intertwined, we'd actually set certain shots up you wouldn't know is a POV, and you think it's an objective angle, and then later on it's going to turn out to reveal itself as a POV. Yeah. And that was really fun. And Joseph and I worked a lot together, because there were several moments where our episodes, and Yaron and Markus, where those moments were going to happen. You know, Joe was looking at something we don't know in episode 1, which he's looking at, and then later in episode 7, you're like, oh my gosh, it was Alice from the other reality.
It sounds like you got everything, what you just said, that you wanted. The way it looked to me was like a mini feature every episode.
Well, I mean, again, these other filmmakers were so incredible. We were so lucky to have them, and it was really fun, like you said, for us, because we could be off, doing some, and we go look at dailies, and it was really exciting. And we would look at each other's dailies to make sure that we were, because the characters and the story are so intertwined. We all needed to make sure that we were in sync in what we were executing.
Did you have any concerns, like this one thread between you and the other guys?
Yeah, I think we made sure we shot a lot of tests early on, that we find the right camera lenses, and we created a show look. And a couple, I think it was important when I talked to the other DPs that everybody brings their own ideas to the table, and I think it makes the whole show richer if you feel different viewpoints and different artistic approaches. There's a handful of things we introduced that everybody
embraced. Yeah,
like reflections as a big topic, right?
And the voyeurism. And,
exactly.
Yeah, it was a very much a collaboration and inspiration, and people could go off and extrapolate on that. But everybody was very respectful to the story we were telling, and the tone and the style, and that it was connected. Nobody went off into off the ranch.
Well, at the end of the day, it was about the story. It was about a mother, and it was about her daughter.
Yeah. And I felt, even especially in this context, we're dealing with different realities. I thought it was especially interesting to see different directors and cinematographers approach. So as you watch the show, some scenes or episodes might feel different, but it also makes sense because we might not, like what we set up, right? In 1 and 2, you jump in another reality. I feel that this adds and elevates the whole show.
Totally agree. Well, finally, was there anything you wanted so much to get in there, but you didn't? Or did you get everything you wanted?
Okay, there's one shot I didn't get. But I can't go on record saying it.
Yeah,
No.
it's funny.
Sure, there's always something that that's a great shot.
Isn't that cute? I know, that's you too. Where is that, in Morocco?
That's in Morocco.
It's me, pure exhaustion.
I know, like what, did we actually make it? Yeah. That was insane because this location is where we shot the rescue vehicles and the helicopters flying and driving across the desert, and they're trying to find them, and they're going in different directions. And with the light, the sun was setting, and then we had like half an hour, 45 minutes to get this footage. And everybody knew where they needed to be. All the cameras, we had a lot of cameras and a drone, and we got all the pieces we needed. And this is Markus and I so relieved at the end of the day.
Well, it's like completely different, yeah.
Like I said, there's so many moving pieces. We had a real helicopter, which has only a certain flight time. We can get it. We wanted to shoot at sunset. We had camera operators in some of the cars shooting handheld out of the vehicles. We had an FPV drone flying very low in between them and chasing the helicopter.
We had a camera on an arm on a vehicle.
And those were KOMODOs on the drone as well?
On the drone, an FPV drone, a KOMODO, and then inside we had a Raptor XL and a regular Raptor. So they all had to work at the same time without shooting each other, and it was like we were so relieved when we just.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, the red provided so much versatility for us. It was awesome, and with the lenses that we chose, I mean, it was beautiful. It was really stunning.
So I just feel like after hearing everything that you guys are talking about, every dollar is on the screen, and every episode looks like a mini feature to me. So congratulations on that. I know you've gotten tons of great press for it. And you don't even have, at the time we're having this conversation, we don't even have the final episode out yet. So I just want to congratulate you guys on a beautiful job.
Thank you so much. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Well, we loved having you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.